Hey, Jeff Lerner here, and today we are talking about one of the hardest but most rewarding things there is on earth, and that is starting up a business. Okay, Jeff Lerner here, and we're talking about starting up your own business. I am a startup veteran. I have started multiple businesses. I've landed multiple times on the Inc. 5000. I've overseen, well over 100 employees and done, the big numbers that I think a lot of people are looking to do when they start up a business. And so I want to share with you some lessons that I have learned from doing that. And oh yeah, if I'm giving my biography, I probably ought to talk about like the dozen times that I crashed and burned and fell flat on my face and felt dumb and felt like a loser and all the failures that allowed me to finally break through and succeed. I didn't want you to think it was like all glory stories. But anyway, so from all of that, from the failures and the successes, I've learned a few things that I want to share with you about starting up your own business. First of all, this term, MVP, I'm not talking about sports. I'm talking about something called minimum viable product. And this is essentially needs to be your obsession, your singular obsession to the point where it makes people uncomfortable how unrelenting you are in the pursuit of this one thing. And basically what this means is, what does my thing, my service, my product, my software, my widget, my whatever, my store, what is the one thing or the smallest amount of things that it needs to have to it where it is minimally viable? Viable in terms of I can actually market it, I can spend a little bit of money to promote it and actually get a return. Einstein had a great saying. He said, things should always be made as simple as possible, but never simpler. Think about that. It's actually kind of a profound thing. Like how, people are trying to calibrate exactly how complicated to make something. You should literally always make something as simple as humanly possible. Just don't go any simpler than that, right? That's how you've got to look at your whole startup business. One of the biggest things I see, and we'll talk about this down here in this letter mumbo jumbo, I'm going to fill in some of those blanks there and we'll talk about this, but one of the biggest things I see is when you have these sort of visionary creator types that are frankly, the people that are crazy enough to not only get the idea, but actually have the gumption to like go start the business and do this thing and try to create something from nothing where, nothing existed before and now I will build something with just the force of my will and my drive. Like that's kind of nuts in the world we live in. That's why, so many people tell you not to do it. But if you are that crazy person, and I'm that crazy person, like I totally get it, you may well struggle with the details, the operations, and the calculations and the time management and the planning and the resource allocation. And so if you're like me, if you're that sort of ADD creative visionary type, it's good to have focal points and things to come back to that you can use to kind of check yourself and snap yourself back into reality. And if you can just remember minimum viable product, that's all we're after, then you can self-correct a lot as you start to chase shiny objects and think you need to add features and bells and whistles to your thing. A lot of times you'll go in and you'll present the thing and maybe you won't get the feedback you want. So then you're like, well, what do I need to add to the thing? We always think, what do I need to add to the thing? It's like a natural expression of our human nature. We think we're not enough and therefore our thing must not be enough, right? So what do I need to add to the thing for people to like it? But again, a lot of times it's not about adding to the thing. It's about changing the message of the thing so that it's simpler, so that it's easier to understand, or even removing from the thing so that its value stands alone without complication or obfuscation. Minimum viable product. You need to drill yourself on this if you're going to start a business. Now, the next two things are two books I actually want you to read. That's meant to be a curly brace. One is called The E-Myth and the other is called Rocket Fuel. Michael Gerber and I can't remember the names of the two guys that wrote Rocket Fuel, but they run Strategic Coach. They're the creators of the strategic coaching method and what's called EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System. Really smart guys. Anyways, E-Myth by Michael Gerber kind of goes through, honestly, it'll save you years of trial and error and getting in your own way and going down the wrong path as an entrepreneur. I just wish so much I'd started with this book. I was an entrepreneur for like over a decade before I started getting results and finding success. And it not too coincidentally happened to be around the time I read this book that like things started to click. And then more recently, I was exposed to this book, Rocket Fuel. And this was so helpful for me because as the visionary, creative, even somewhat impulsive guy or gal who, you tend to be if you're even on YouTube watching videos about starting businesses, it's tempting to beat yourself up a lot and be kind of hard on yourself and think that there's something wrong with you because you have these big ideas and yet it can be so hard to see them through into plans. And a lot of times, if you're like me, you'll be frustrated in this world because you're like, well, how are these other people succeeding? They don't seem as creative as me. They don't seem as excited as me. They don't seem as dynamic as me or as energetic or as hyper or fast moving or motivated. But they're like slow and methodical and yet they make it work. Why can't I be more like that? Or what am I missing? And you're like hard on yourself, right? Well, every business needs two functions. And this is literally what this whole book is about, Rocket Fuel. You need a visionary and you need an integrator. And those very rarely are the same person. There's so many classic examples through history, whether you're talking about Henry Ford or you're talking about Steve Jobs or you're talking about Bill Gates. Any of the great entrepreneurs, so often they became great entrepreneurs. Walt Disney had his brother Roy, visionary integrator. You don't hear as much about the integrators, these guys, and that's Rocket Fuel's term for this person. It's the operations guy. It's the guy that doesn't seek the limelight, doesn't need to lead with ideas, but finds his groove by helping, essentially catching the visionary's ideas and saying, okay, well, this one doesn't fit right now, so we're going to set it aside. This one could be good, but we'll get to it in 3 months. This one we needed, thank you. And back here, I've got my plan of how it all fits together. Like, you need that person in your life if you're a visionary. And frankly, if you're an integrator, you might be great at making plans, but you struggle at leadership, you struggle at communication, and these are generalizations. Like, I'm not trying to paint everybody with the same brush, but it's yin and yang, it's male and female. These parts need each other. I probably just pissed off the internet gods by saying males and females need each other, so just please don't get too angry. Sorry, it's old habits. Anyway, read these two books, all right? E-Myth and Rocket Fuel, and you will save yourself a ton of time in terms of how you approach your startup. And then finally, this one is kind of like cliche, but I'm going to say it anyways because it's cliche for a reason, because it's something that most people don't do nearly as effectively as they could, and that's time management. Look, if you're going to start a business, understand what you're taking on. You're doing, like, statistically, one of the hardest things there is. Now, having kids, like being a parent, I'm a parent, I have 4 kids. It's really hard. Raising kids is tough, but statistically, at least in developed countries, and even in underdeveloped countries now, thankfully, most kids survive. Parenting is hard, but most of us at least get our kids to adulthood living. That is like not true with business. Most businesses don't survive. Most startups don't survive. You think you need skills to raise children? You need skills to raise a business. Children, here's what children have. Children have this like biological urge to live and grow and thrive on their own because they're animate beings, right? Like if there's food, once they get control of their limbs, they'll feed themselves. The natural drive is to feed, nurture themselves, right? Like at least you have some sort of support from the instincts of the child. A business left to its own instincts, all it does is destroy. Like, this is a harsh thing to say. A business left to its own instincts will destroy. It'll consume. It'll eat your capital. It'll eat your time. It'll eat your relationships. It'll eat your happiness. Like, this is the real truth that, maybe isn't like what they rah-rah teach you in school, but this is the truth of business. Go read Profit First. Read about Profit First. By the way, I should have that on the list. Great book that basically talks about how you have to harness the energy of a business and keep it from destroying itself and everything around it. Business is more like fire than life. A baby is life. It wants to grow and live and thrive. Business is fire. It just wants to consume everything around it unless you know how to harness it. That's why you got to get educated, and that's why you've got to be obsessive about time management. Most people, I think, recognize the importance of time management as a concept, but they just don't take it nearly as far as they need to take it. Most people, I don't see having the discipline in time management to literally schedule themselves to 15 or 30 minute intervals, to manage their their sleep patterns, to optimize their energy patterns, to think about time management in terms of nutrition, to put relationships in balance where they need to be and hold to them with discipline, especially like with family and spouses. It can be really hard to set good boundaries, even friends. If you don't make this your top priority, then that's like making water and fire extinguishers not a top priority when you're trying to start fires. Like, understand that. When you're starting a business, you're starting a fire. Fire safety needs to be your top priority. If you're starting a business, time management needs to be your top priority, to the exclusion of those other things that other people in your life will try to tell you are more important. They'll tell you that you're being extreme. They'll tell you that you're taking yourself too seriously, but they don't want it like you do. You gotta understand, they don't want your startup as bad as you do. In fact, they may not want it at all. They may really like the version of you that's just you, the version that they've gotten attached to, the version that meets their needs. What would happen if your startup took off? What would it mean for their life if your startup really grew to fruition and manifested as the vision that you hold for yourself? What might that mean for these other people who are telling you that you're being too obsessive about your time management? See the trap? You got to take this on yourself, okay? So anyways, hope that helps. If you're getting ready to start a business, or if you've started a business, I'd love to hear your experience. Am I on point? Am I off base? Like, do you resonate with anything I'm saying? Leave some comments below if you have questions, if you're getting ready to start a business. Like, I've done this a few times. If you have questions about marketing, questions about raising capital, questions about operations, questions about hiring, questions about book recommendations, I'm happy to address all of it. I try to address every comment that I get. And if you like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Make sure you click the alarm so you get notified when I post future videos. And with that, we'll wrap this up and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks so much.